So let's discuss the developments further there in South Sudan. We're joined here in studio by John Gachie. He's a journalist and analyst on South Sudan affairs. Thank you, John, for joining us. So let's first talk about what the AU official has said about the need to deploy an IGAD force in the oil-rich towns there in South Sudan to quell the violence. Is this a viable option?
It's viable at two levels. One, if that will stop the two groups from fighting. Two, that both parties will agree to such kind of a force, its composition and its mandate. But it's unviable if it will lead to a discussion of power sharing. That is a no-go area for the government. That is a no-go area for a lot of people in South Sudan. Now, will the IGAD forces indeed, from which countries will they come from? Because Uganda is perceived as more partisan. Is Kenya, possibly Ethiopia, keen? I doubt that they are keen to provide forces at the time. There are issues still over the UN mission, the forces that are there. So IGAD might sound perhaps a viable option right now, but I think it's still a little far off. There's a question of financing. Right. There's a question of mandate. So right now, this is just at the very preliminary stages.
Right, so then let's look at what's there on the table. There was, of course, the signed cessation of hostilities agreement between the two parties, but then that has failed to hold. Why? And then what then should be done for it indeed to hold?
One, both parties to this conflict were hoping that they will buy time by the cessation of hostilities. Let's be clear about this, Penina. Neither party was and is still keen to kind of resolve this through negotiation, despite their public pronouncement. It is an obvious and perhaps an open secret that both parties are seeking and preparing for an offensive. Now, can the OAU, can the international community hold them to account? Possibly. Have they done that any better? My view is that they've been a bit too slow, and I think they've kind of been playing into the hands of these two groups. Will there be a ceasefire? That was for sure. I think both parties are preparing for a final military showdown. Can Africa afford this? No. Can they move? Yes. Have they moved? No, because there's no political will.
Right. So then that begs the question then, what next? What should be done? Because as it is, South Sudan seems to have lost confidence in the UN mission there. In fact, they've accused it of meddling with the internal affairs of the country. You mentioned about IGAD and there being perhaps a lack of willingness by member countries such as Kenya and Ethiopia to get involved. So what then should be the viable solution to this conflict?
Right now, I think from my take is that unless there is sufficient, and I repeat this, sufficient engagement by the African Union, the UN, the local IGAD, to remove the kid gloves, as it were, now, and engage both parties and say, this can't go on. And when I'm saying this is that I think both parties are aware there's a lot of posturing. Right. By both the UN, the African Union, and possibly even the IGAD. And in the meantime, they are trying to resolve this militarily, despite their public announcement that they want cessation of hostilities. Why? Right now, the relationship between South Sudan and the UN are at their lowest. That is the UN mission. Right. Possibly this has more to do with some personalities within the UN. It's not necessarily
the body itself.
The body itself. Now, how is the UN engaging to address these issues? Now, the mandate of the UNMISS is coming for renewal. We are hearing certain statements to the effect that this will be subject to a public or parliamentary vetting. That is perhaps way off. We are hearing the Troika, the US, Britain and Norway saying it's unacceptable. But what I'm saying is, most of all this is more of a slap on the wrist. They haven't moved into put sanctions. Has IGAD perhaps put its foot down against, say, Riek Machar or even the president and say, this is no-go area? I doubt that. I think they're still, all of them, posturing.
All right.
Yeah.
We have to leave it there for now, John. Thanks very much for those insights. John Gachie live in studio.